To do effective painting, you need to have the right size and the right kind of brush for whatever job you're using. Here we have a small, a medium, and a large brush. These two are made with natural hairs. This one is an acrylic brush. It's made from oil-based products. There are lots of different kinds of brushes. This one looks like kind of an interesting brush, but it definitely would not be used for anything we're going to do today because it's kind of like a mop, maybe used for watercolor, something very watery. Here's a brush we'd use for painting our wall in our home. Here's a brush that's not even a brush. It's called a palette knife. If you have paint that's thick, you get some neat effects by moving it around. Some brushes just do interesting effects. Here's a brush that has texturizers. Here's a fan brush. This would be a brush for doing a painting, maybe with oil paint or acrylic paint. This kind of a bristle, it's a little bit stiffer, is for thicker paint. And the long handle means you're not supposed to be standing really close to it. You're supposed to stand at a distance when you make what you're going to make. Whatever brush you use, it's going to leave a distinctive texture. So if we use our brush in one direction, it's going to make a smooth texture. If we push and pull the brush, it's going to make a kind of hairy texture. One is not better than the other, but you should know what it is that you're trying to accomplish because the texture matters, it counts. The paints we're going to use are tempera paints. Tempera. A tempera paint is a paint that is permanent in the way that it will stain your clothes, but it's not permanent in the way that if you get water on it, it's going to come up again. It's not going to stay put. If I paint a color on top, the color is going to mix. Even if we let it sit for 100 years, the paint's still going to mix if we put on top. Tempera paint is famous for being good at covering. So if we use tempera paint in a watery way, this is, by the way, is a palette, it's going to have a transparent look. Transparent means you can see through it. Translucent means you can see through it a little bit. Here I am taking some of the water out. I see through it some, but not completely. If I want to increase how opaque my paint is, if I add just a little bit of white, not enough to really change the color, it makes it cover better. So if I want it opaque, I can add a little white. Of course, the dark colors cover better. Light colors such as yellow, orange, yellow-orange, yellow-green, even some of the greens, they just don't cover very well. When you paint, you are going to have something to clean your brushes in. So I have a cup of water, and you should have the cup that has your color and your number on it. If you grab someone else's or they grab yours, let me know because we can't keep it that way. You're responsible for having your own. What I'm doing is I'm gently swishing the brush in the paint, scraping off the extra water, and then I'm drawing it off very, very gently. Don't pull, don't twist, because your brush has kind of an inner spring. And by the way, this part where I'm asking you to dry your brush, that's not just a good idea, it's essential. You have to dry your brush. If you don't, your paints will be transparent and the texture will show more. It will have a scrubby looking texture. It will not be opaque. Paints like acrylic colors, here it says acrylic, they are a little more transparent. Tempera paints are supposed to be covering. If we were in college taking a class, we wouldn't call it tempera paint, we'd call it designer's gouache. It's kind of the same kind of thing. Here's what I'm talking about that inner spring. So if I have a brush here, and I push down and up, it goes straight again. That's because kind of like the inner spring makes it do that. Okay, now the tip It's a little fluffy now because it's dry. If I get it wet, it goes to a tip. Much better tip. This is exactly the same brush. Pushing down and up, it keeps going to a tip. If I use my brush like a pencil, I'll lose my tip. Here I am charging up my brush. I want the paint on the hairs. I don't want it on the metal. Nothing bad will happen if I put it on the metal, but it's not going to go where I want it to. It's just going to get on my fingers. If I use my brush sideways, this is sideways. That's how you use your pencil. If I do that, the tip spreads. Do you see that? How the tip doesn't stay straight? If I want the tip to stay straight, I've got my little pinky out there, and I'm pulling. Pull. Pull. Charging up your brush effectively is what's going to give you control over your paint. Now, mind you, control isn't what it's all about. Artists are not thinking, oh, must stay in the lines. Artists are thinking, what do I want to express? What kind of texture is going to be good for what I'm doing? Okay? When you're done with a color, swish out your brush, scrape off the extra gently, dry it gently. Never, not even for a second, leave your brush sitting upside down in your water. Very, very, very quickly, it ruins your brush. We can't fix it after that. If you want to set your brush down for a minute, you can put it across your cup. You can set it on the table. You can even put it upside down. It doesn't matter. Although, if you have the wood in the water, the wood swells and the paint cracks off. But that's cosmetic. I'm not so worried about that. But I do worry that the tip of the brush stay tippy. So, we are using Tempera paint. You need to use good brush hygiene using the cup that is assigned to you. When you fill up the water, you don't want to fill it to the very top, because if you do, when you clean out your brush, the water will go where you don't want it to go. If you put a newspaper underneath, that will save you a little bit of cleanup. If you don't, all you need to do is make sure you go to the sink area, get a sponge. When you get a sponge, you squeeze the extra out, not twist it. Don't just go back there and use the sponge like that, because it's all dripping and that will not clean. Squeeze the extra out, take it to your area, wash your spills, and then bring the sponge back.